I think we need a bit of time so that we can learn more about what was going on in this colony of 400 ostriches. The average one weighs, over 200 pounds. We're not talking about small animals. These are very expensive animals. They're very old animals. Like I said, they can live to over 75 years of age. So we need to put a pause on this termination until we can get more information and see how the scientific community can benefit from this.
SaveTheOstriches.com. That's the special campaign I've set up for you to help join forces of other people who are standing up for farmers who are desperate to save the lives of their 400 ostriches, who they say are healthy and have herd immunity. Yet the Canadian Food Inspection Agency says they must die and be disposed of by February 1st. Now, today, I'm bringing you an interview with renowned scientist Dr. Stephen Pelech, a professor in the Division of Neurology and Medicine at the University of British Columbia. He's the president and chief scientific officer with Kinetics Bioinformatics Corporation and the co-chair Scientific and Medical Advisory Committee with the Canadian Citizens Care Alliance. And during the spread of COVID-19, he and his team developed really good antibody tests. So he's going to talk to us today about why these animals likely have herd immunity and more. But before I get to that, I want to give you an important update from Katie Pisitny. That's the adult daughter who grew up with these ostriches. Remember, they live to be about 75 years old, and you're not going to want to miss this.
From what we understand, there were 2 sick birds that were that died, and the CFIA tested them with a PCR test for avian flu, and they tested positive with this PCR test, and so it's been deemed that the flock needs to be culled.
I just get off the phone with Katie. Now, she helps with the farm as well. She grew up with these ostriches. By the time you see this, it might be yesterday, the day before this call happened. But she has informed me that the CFIA showed up at their house and, get this, told them that February 1st isn't just doomed day for their birds that they're being told to kill, by the way. It's also the day that the CFIA has full control over their property. They will be going on the properties and have the ability to take all things ostrich related. Now, it doesn't even specify. Basically, the wording, as I'm told, is anything. So they were told that. And her mom, Karen, the co-owner of the Universal Ostrich Farm, where this is all happening, she was specifically asked, where are you keeping the ostrich antibodies for COVID-19? Now, if you saw my previous reports at SaveTheOstriches.com, you know that these birds are not being used for human consumption. No, they are being used to further science. In fact, in a partnership with Japan, Canada, and the United States, these antibodies, these robust antibodies that these birds are allegedly showing they have to the avian flu, are being used for research in Japan by the man you're seeing on the screen here, who's developed a vaccine to stop the very virus that's being used not just to end the lives of these ostriches, but millions upon millions upon millions of other animals, restricting our poultry in British Columbia and beyond. So if you are concerned about potential government overreach and farmer sovereignty, please go to SaveTheOstriches.com, fire off those emails that I have already written for you to the right people. And guess what? I've added a name here. Her name is Courtney Fotheringham. I am told that she is the supervisor with the CFIA who did the okay for the culling. So we've added her to the list so that you could respectfully ask her to reconsider. Remember, these are being used for research. It doesn't align with Moderna just receiving $590 million for mRNA vaccine development to attack the avian flu. Now, here is Dr. Stephen Pelech.
Yes, with this ostrich farm, they have about 400 ostriches. Some of these ostriches are over 30 years old. The ostriches can live to about 75 years of age. And this ostrich farm is actually has been in development for well over 20 years. And these ostriches, they're actually not used for human consumption. They're used to produce products, in particular antibodies, in fact, against the SARS-CoV-2 virus, that can be used for putting on products, for example, masks that can capture the virus before you can breathe in the virus. So they have all these uses, yes. The antibodies have very strong affinity, a very specific binding affinity for a particular target. And so you can develop in these birds basically antibodies against the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And these antibodies could be used even therapeutically. But the thing is that these animals, half the birds were on the farm before 2021, which is when the H5N1 virus, influenza virus, first really hit North America. And they did have deaths at that time. They were diagnosed as due to a different illness because they weren't testing for H5N1 at the time. And since then, there's been a more recent outbreak. They've lost about 69 of the birds to sickness and most likely from the influenza virus. However, what's interesting is that the animals that were on the farm before 2021, they actually have gone through that. They actually have no deaths. Some got a little bit sick, but they recovered. But the newer animals, they got sick and they had their deaths. But now the herd has what we think is probably natural immunity. And as a consequence, they're healthier and they're fine. However, because the family, I guess there was a report that they had 2 deaths of birds, and the Canadian Food and Inspection Agency came in and they did some tests, and they found that from the 2 birds that they had using the PCR test. Now, the PCR test is like we had with COVID, and it's probably used at the same, what we call cycle threshold number, which means that you probably have about a 90% false positive rate. But anyways, based on these 2 birds, the family was informed that they had to cull their herd by February the 1st. And there's been no further testing or other types of testing, for example, where there's a live virus that was actually in these samples. All we have is a PCR test. Again, the PCR test can give you false positives, if you even have fragments of the virus. Doesn't mean, that they're actually contagious and will cause a replication of the virus in a new host. It just means that there are bits and pieces that are left over that get amplified using the very powerful technology. So this, to me as a scientist, I've been very interested in the H5N1 virus and developing a test for natural immunity like we did with SARS-CoV-2. But I can't develop such a test if I don't have material to actually test. And so it's very rare in humans. It's very rare, actually, even in cattle, although it happens. We have been culling millions of chickens in BC and across North America. And now we're looking at taking out this ostrich farm. And so the ostrich farm, these animals are very well documented. They've been saving their egg yolks for about 20 years. And so we have an excellent model system with which to both develop a test to see whether or not a person would have natural immunity, but also how long does that immunity last and how effective is it? Because this is all extremely well documented. So the sacrifice of these animals, which probably have herd immunity and probably offer better protection to the community. So when they have these wild birds, these ducks that, for example, land on their property and contaminate their animals, and it's unavoidable. Even if you killed all of the domestic animals that get influenza, you won't stop it. It will keep coming back as long as the wild birds are propagating it until they develop natural immunity. And then it'll be something else that comes along. And I think the fact of the matter is, the more that these animals are exposed and have a developed immune system, the less likely that they will become infected in the future. So these aren't birds that maybe are cultivated for 60 days and then they're used for human consumption. These are birds that are maintained for decades and that are producing products that will benefit I think the biomedical research community and the public, in general. So I think we have to stop this until at least we can get some more information about whether these birds are an actual threat. And at this point, the fact that, and it was, as I pointed out earlier, that half these animals that were older, none of them actually developed the influenza symptoms, and certainly none of them died. This is a pretty good indication that these animals have very strong herd immunity. And this is one of the reasons why the ostriches were being used in the first place, because they have very, very strong immune responses. That once they recover from an infection, they're less likely to be infected by that pathogen or a related pathogen again.
From your perspective, what would be a more sensible way to address this?
Well, I think at this point, we recognize that the animals aren't sick. So I think I would hope that the Food and Inspection Agency would, in fact, extend their deadline so that more studies and tests can be done to first establish whether they have natural immunity. Are they still infectious? If they have more PCR tests, is there any evidence? Can they take anything from these birds and use it to infect cells in culture and propagate it and show that we actually have, active virus that's there? And what parts of the immune system, like which parts of the virus, were these birds making antibodies against? That information is vital for us to develop better vaccines to take on, both for the domestic animal industries as well as for people. We can develop vaccines with this knowledge, but we won't have that knowledge unless we do these kind of tests. So I think we need a bit of time so that we can learn more about what was going on in this colony of 400 ostriches. The average one weighs, over 200 pounds. We're not talking about small animals. These are very expensive animals. They're very old animals. Like I said, they can live to over 75 years of age. So we need to put a pause on this termination until we can get more information and see how the scientific community can benefit from this.
Look at his face. Isn't he cute? How can you not go to savetheostriches.com to help save his life and hundreds of his friends so that they can help with this scientific capabilities, give us a variety of options when it comes to attacking these illnesses. So again, go to savetheostriches.com today.